Hey everybody, it's Arthur here, and I just wanted to make a simple video kind of showing off some of the work I did during the past couple months, or at least before the new year. Everything dedicated to sort of looking for that story I talked about vaguely in the last video. So this is some of my process. I did a couple pretty extensive drawings. If you want to just hear this video in the background while you're studying, let me know and I'll make one without the voiceover, so you can kind of focus and you don't have to hear my voice if you don't want to. So these drawings that I got going on in the background here are actually drawings I did for that Leporello comic book style narrative that I talked about in my previous videos. And the goal with this Leporello was to turn narrative and drawing into a research tool. So I created a story in order to not only explore themes of architecture, but also explore themes more deeply related to the human experience. So the story, long story short, is about a young man who has a background in architecture, and as he's walking through the streets of Koenji, he feels like something is missing, until he comes across this old house that piques his curiosity because it seems to have a soul. And at that moment, he meets an old man who says that he used to be an architect. And he takes this young man on a journey through time to explore the evolution of Tokyo through the changes that happen in Koenji. Eventually, as they approach the modern day, the main character realizes that all the new buildings are like tombstones and memento moris for the old buildings that once brought character and togetherness in the streets of Tokyo. At this point, the old man admits and laments that he had a big hand in this rapid rush for modernization, as he, the character himself, symbolizes the massive development effort of the mid-20th century in Tokyo. He regrets the part he played in the demise of these old buildings and traditional livelihoods, and also regrets what he did to the environment in his run for progress and pragmatism. And through this story, I wanted to visit, of course, themes related to architecture such as the urban replacement, destruction of the environment, the disappearance of rivers, etc. But I also wanted to talk about human themes such as loss, shame, and talk about themes related to the challenges we face as architects, which is embodied by the plight of this old man. Because I think it's important that architects realize that in some way they are also responsible for the construction of society, even if architecture is itself inspired by the state of society. But I think ultimately this project was perhaps too ambitious for a school project with everything else I have to do. But I'm hoping to revisit it later because I think I have a lot to say through this story. Now, I'm going to talk more about the creative process in and of itself. So for those of you familiar with animation, I started this Leporello in a straight-ahead method, where you draw each frame as you go for several reasons. One of those reasons being that if I plan for too long, I tend to get stuck in the weeds and be slow to start. Here, I needed to start producing and keep creating to simply start the thing up and to stay motivated. It also allowed me to explore a lot more and properly do my research, because when you're drawing something, you're actually trying to understand it. And that's something I feel like a lot of people nowadays overlook when they just go straight to the PC. Which is why, as I was drawing, I was also creating an opportunity for learning. So for example, if I wanted to explore the ecosystem of Koenji in the story, I would research it, and then I would draw, applying the things I learned while enriching the background of the story. That's why I underwent this so-called creative research method, where I turned story and drawing into a method of understanding. I was able to go with the flow and explore my curiosity, as well as accommodate analysis, understanding, and the formulation of a visual narrative. And also, it's just plain more fun to research this way, since you're producing while investigating. It makes your research directly applicable, which definitely beats following links or research papers online for hours on end. And finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about the specific drawing tools and specs that I had while drawing this. So I used 160 gram per meter squared A3 Bristol paper, which I cut in half on the long side to create a format that was foldable to create the Leporello effect. And then using my drafting pencil, which is a Kurotoga 05, I would block out the proportions and the perspective, which are very important because if you screw those up, you kind of screw up the way people look at your drawing. Your texture and your shading can be on point, but if your proportions and perspective are off, then the whole drawing just looks kind of weird. And then I added the finishing touch, which is the inking using my Sakura Micron felt tip pens, ranging from 0.05 to 0.8 millimeters, I believe. And then final important detail is I actually created a hierarchy or rule set for the line width variation when inking the drawing. That way I could create depth in the drawing and emphasize different things with different line widths. So for example, I would take a 0.8 to draw the outline of the building, and then I would take the 0.05 to do the finer details. I think this is a very great, quick, and easy way to make your drawings look more professional and give them more depth, because it's actually something we learned pretty early on in architecture school with regards to our plans and things like that we can actually apply to our drawings to give them this effect. But I think that's all I've got to say for this video, and if you enjoyed it, found it interesting, whatever, drop me a like and subscribe, because it took way too long for me to record the voiceover for this. But I did enjoy making the drawings, and I hope that you got some value from it. But in any case, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.